And here we go. My name is Roland, and
And
over
I'm Rish.
there, Rish at the other side of the pond has some headlines for us. Rish, go forward.
So I woke up to just the most fantastic news at 5 a.m. So after all the hemming and hawing, I've by the international community, I've come to the realization that Poland just isn't screwing around anymore. They've already what are they, I think they're working on doubling their GDP. They're going up to what 5% by like 2030, 2035. I mean 5% of GDP. I think I saw those numbers. It was either 4 or 5. That's insane. So, but to bring it back to the headline, they're going to send Ukraine fighter jets. These are their old Russian stocks, and like most of the, Eastern Bloc countries that are NATO or NATO aligned, they're hoping basically to purge all their Soviet and Russian made, weapons, get them used up, and basically they're being used as deployed. So instead of having these stockpiles of these depleted munitions, these old munitions, you can give it all to Ukraine and then just get brand new stuff from the Americans or the Germans or
Yeah.
whoever else, the French. So in keeping with that, just because I think Poland's still a little hot over that missile that went a little too far west, because they're sending 4 fighter jets, which is what Zelensky keeps saying: send us jets, send us jets, send us jets. Me personally, I don't think jets are the issue right now, because I
Yeah.
think it's been saturated. The whole country and the surrounding areas have been, because even like you look at, like Moldova and Romania, they're deploying air defense systems to their border already. Just they're getting ready. So the whole region, but especially the country of Ukraine, it's so saturated with anti-air. I mean, from shoulder launch to all the way up to towed to vehicles. I mean, I'll shoot my $100,000 rocket, missile to blow up your $10 million plane. Doesn't
Yeah.
bother me a bit. I'll do it all day.
Well, there is quite a lot of it. So just for context, the percentage you were talking about GDP, that is the expenditure on defense, obviously.
Yes.
And right, first of all, I totally agree with you that those 4 fighter jets from Poland and those 9 from Slovenia or Slovakia, sorry, Slovakia, are not going to change the course of war. And for me, I see this as one more political step in terms of NATO telling Putin, come at us. Stop talking, bitch. Come if you have the balls. We are ready to roll. And if that really goes down, first of all, the Poles have, or the Poles were the ones that, when the 2014 invasion of Crimea happened, they went to NATO and said, "This is an Article 4 or 5 situation. Let's mobilize."
Yep.
And instead of waiting for NATO to say, "Well, no, it's not," the Polish mobilized their armed forces and put a couple of tank divisions right on the Ukrainian border. That's
Well,
what they
if
did in 2014.
if you were a Polish leader and it was your job to look after the Polish people, if you were elected as the representative of these people to look after them, you have to be cognizant of history. If I was a Polish citizen, I
Absolutely,
would say
absolutely.
this war, somebody else's country is getting bombed into the Stone Age. Screw that. We're not getting invaded. Our country's not getting rubbled again. We're
Exactly.
sending us somebody else. Screw that. We're
The,
tired of this shit.
the Poles have a lot of animosity for all the right reasons
Hey,
against the
good for
Russians.
them. They deserve
So,
it.
so
They
there is that absolutely. And looking at that, the
people
Poles
did things to them.
absolutely, and look at it from this point of view. One of the things that I mean, at the beginning, I never looked at it in this way, but when you look at the history of World War II, the Polish army was under-equipped, under-trained, and in a much shorter time span, extracted more casualties from the German army than the Western allies in a much longer period of time, and the Western allies were prepared. Yeah.
No, and
So
then kept fighting and asked for help from Churchill and everybody else. And the
absolutely.
resistance, that all of their pleas for help largely fell on deaf ears.
Well, there wasn't much of. Well, first of all, the Western allies were not ready for war. Point one. The Polish administration completely underestimated the evil nature of Hitler. And just before, well, many people are aware of that Poland and Germany actually had a non-aggression pact. And
So did Germany and Russia.
well, there's
Technically
that,
the
you know.
Soviet Union, whatever.
So, and the Poles actually, or the Polish administration actually, when the situation deteriorated in Europe, the Polish administration was actually keen on getting along with the Germans and making the Polish people realize the alliance with France is nothing we can depend on. The French are hundreds of kilometers away, and the Germans are right next to us, and the Germans hate the Russians. So why don't we get along with each other? But a point.
And
Case in point.
everyone has tanks, and you're a nice flat part of Europe,
Yeah,
right
I
there in
mean,
the middle.
right, and that is the point. The point, as you were saying, the Poles don't want to get invaded again. The Poles don't want to be occupied by the Russians yet
No, I'm with
again.
them. If they want to start to stand behind the Polish people, look, if y'all are tired of the bullshit steadily getting thrown into your last little campfire when you're trying to finish your last meal,
Yeah.
hey, good for y'all.
But
I'm
again,
glad.
but going back to this thing, I think it's more of a political thing. And I just searched this morning. The first news that I came across was that the Chinese are delivering assault rifles and body armor to the Russians, which the White House now says it has not been confirmed. But look at it from this point of view. We are getting ready for a situation, and
Chinese body armor
unofficially.
shit.
Well, that is secondly, the Chinese supplies are the reason why the initial invasion hasn't worked out. Yeah, tires, body armor, food, crap. So yeah, at some point when you are a Russian conscript or on a short-term contract, when you're being told or you're there for an exercise, and you realize in the middle of Ukraine, well, I'm not getting food, I don't have ammunition, and my equipment is shite, you start walking back to Russia. That's totally understandable. But the point is, unofficially, the Chinese have supported this invasion from day one. Even before the invasion, they have supported this action politically because it sets the precedent for their invasion of Taiwan. It's not going well. So there is the realization of, well, that invasion of Taiwan won't go that well either. So this is a situation literally where the Cold War is starting to get hot. So I am a child of the Cold War. I have seen the situation back then, and looking at it from a point of view, the Russians and the Chinese are the aggressor in both cases. And if you let a bully get away, if you let a bully take Crimea, and if you let a bully build artificial islands in an area that doesn't belong to them, they get bolder and bolder. So, and a bully of that magnitude only understands a very hard no, straight in the face. So, and apparently, putting a couple of tanks, and it was their newest tanks at that time. The Poles got Leopard tanks from us a couple of years ago. So they put German Leopard tanks on the border of Ukraine. Screw it that they have the Polish Eagle instead of the Iron Cross on their side. The Russians know when German tanks are coming, they're coming. Yeah. So there is that. Now the next step is, and if Putin is not completely detached from reality, he knows NATO is going to steamroll the Russian army. And I am actually not as confident as Peter Zahan, who says, well, the casualty rate will be 1,000 to 1 in the Western world's favor. Yeah,
I think he
it
might
will
have been
be
going for
way
a dramatic
higher.
overization there.
I don't
I
think
saw
so.
the same video.
So I don't think he's exaggerating. I can think of multiple operations that will literally knock the chair out of under the Russian army that are, or in the other on the other side of the world, in a case of invasion of Taiwan, of the PLA. So but let me put this forward. Let me put this forward at this moment in time, and up for a comment. If American armed forces and intelligence services have not gone out of business, we are already there, and we are already engaged in clandestine operations inside Ukraine and inside Russia for a potential scenario of Russia escalating this conflict in any shape or form. And your thoughts on that?
I had a thought. Let's circle back to that. I had a thought right in the middle. I think everyone's forgetting something, or maybe I'm looking into it too much. Let me play devil's advocate for a second. Take Russia, take China. They're basically saying you provoked us into invading because we kept our side and you kept putting threats closer and closer to us. So does everyone forget that the United States, under at the time it was the Trump policy, we gave a political favor to Benjamin Netanyahu when we finally recognized some lands that Israel had taken, but for the exact same reason, it was a great place to fire missiles from. Taiwan, it's a great place to fire missiles from. Poland, Ukraine, all these countries, all the Baltics, and up there, Latvia, Estonia. A lot of weapons were placed on the borders of 3 countries. So call it China, Russia, Israel. Does everyone forget we gave Israel a pass? Like we publicly recognized their lands because we liked Netanyahu to give him political capital coming into a very tough vote. But does that factor into does anybody remember when we did that? And we did that after the Crimean annexation. I don't think anybody remembers this because it's not a popular thing to remember right now.
And even if so, the annexation of Crimea or the militarization of the South China Sea. Well, first of all, the NATO expansion is not an issue that NATO wanted to expand. Actually, they did not want to, because
5 consecutive presidents said that there would be no new NATO countries admitted, that they wouldn't support NATO expansion to the east.
So, and that is an issue. What do you do as NATO?
We lied a lot.
We didn't.
Yes, we did.
There is a point. No, there is a point. Let's just say you're Estonia, or you are any of the Eastern NATO partners. Your country has been devastated by the Russians at least once in the last 50 years.
Yeah.
Your country was occupied by the Russians at least once in the last 50 years. Now, this power, this nation that had power over you collapses, and it starts rebuilding. You suddenly are free, and you realize the person that had, or the country that had power over yours, is starting to rebuild. You are not going to wait until you are being violated again.
No, I would jump on the top of them and start stabbing them in the neck over and over.
And
like, if you got them down, If
You
you let
see,
them
this
back
is,
up, they're gonna come after you. Keep them down.
and that is the situation for a number of countries close to Russian border. So there was one very intelligent comment a couple of years ago when this, I think it was during the invasion of Crimea, when the Russians tried to use this as justification. And there was a comment saying, well, the Russians should ask themselves, why does everybody around them want to have a hard border and foreign troops to defend them against the Russians? So there is a reason for these animosities. And when you have seen how many wars did the Russians start since 1991, that's quite a few. So there is. I wouldn't say they are second to the U.S. I think they trump the U.S. in that category. And looking at this, I keep saying you don't actually need to put soldiers into a foreign country or start shooting at people to wage war. So we are not only talking about cyber warfare, or we are talking about political and social warfare. So, or what else is happening when one of the first things the Russians did when they realized the original invasion wasn't going well, they started targeting grain exports. And the reason for that is Ukraine supplies grain mainly to a number of African countries. And if those people start starving, they start moving north to Europe. So Putin is calculating he is killing two birds with one stone. Yeah, eliminating Ukrainian supplies for others, and causing issues, social issues and financial issues in Europe by cutting off supplies and increasing economic migration.
But
So
wasn't Putin before the war? Wasn't he already funneling migrants into EU's borders on the north end? I'll let you out, Kaiser.
well, there is this component that the Syrian refugee crisis 2014-2015 is not solely a Russian issue. Is in essence, there is, well, first of all, there is international agreements, and where those people showed up at our borders in Turkey is a safe country, believe it or not. We can argue about that. Greece is a safe country. Italy is a safe country. And the rest of the European countries decided not to bother about it. And at some point, both Turkey, Greece, and Italy said, well, these people keep coming to us. Nobody is addressing the issues. So we let people walk on. Yeah. So there is that. Certainly, Russian intervention in Syria has increased the problem. The Russians are not known for their civilized forms of warfare, and it is essentially from Putin's perspective, he has an interest. If you keep the issue relatively domestic, he has an interest in safeguarding Russian future. And as you are saying, the Western Russia is essentially flat. You can roll in your tank all the way to Moscow, and that is a problem from the Russian perspective. Their access points to their country exist plentiful, and they are not under Russian control. So
Well, we just made another NATO lake.
we look, and
So, and the Nord Stream goes right through there. So, I mean, that's under our control now as well.
well, when you look at well, energy is another issue that is or did basically lead Putin to the conclusion, well, I occupy Ukraine. It's a done deal within 3 days. That's faster than NATO or Europe can react. Yeah. And if they then do as much as open their mouth, I will say, shut up or I turn off the gas. Which, yeah.
And now you can turn off the grain too.
And what Putin didn't expect, number one, the invasion is not going well. That is on paper, that is the biggest problem. But in reality, it is not. In reality, his biggest problem is that all the calculations that led him to make this decision of invading Ukraine have proven to be false. The Western world is not disunited. The Western world is ready to take him on. We know, and Putin knows how that is going to go. So, in terms of what, and Putin is not the only one that knows how this will go. So Putin is in the unfortunate situation that even if he has successes in Ukraine, which he doesn't much, he is politically finished in his own country. He has basically eliminated any form of serious opposition or intelligentsia that is potentially against him. Which also means there is a number of people that do not have the ability of Putin. Putin is an intelligent man. All credit where it's due. But there is no one with that kind of caliber coming after him in any shape or form. So
no one with that sort of control.
That is the second point. There is no one that would be able to exercise this form of control over Russia, and not only the mercenary squads they are running in Ukraine now. There is definitely a scenario where one of these mercenary groups, where one of his own generals decides to pull the plug. That is absolutely a real scenario, and especially when you talk about a military coup to depose him, you are talking about, well, who comes out on top, and that could be someone who is completely crazy, yeah, and orders the missiles to fly. It could be someone who wants to make a point but realizes that nukes are not the solution. Again, to quote Peter Zehan, nukes in Ukraine don't make sense. Nukes on NATO or the EU don't make much sense, because even if you do that, and even if NATO wouldn't react to it, which we absolutely will, the Ukrainians have so much Russian equipment, they don't have enough people. That is the Ukrainian problem. They have all the hardware they want and need, except fighter jets, okay? But as he said,
or whatever he says next week.
Fighter jets are not really contributing to resolving the situation militarily, as you are saying. For example, I have figures for, believe it or not, for the North Korean army. And the North Korean army has 75,000 people whose only job on the battlefield is to run their equivalent of a Stinger across the battlefield. So literally, you don't need to shoot down aircraft. You need to deny them access to your airspace, which in essence means you need to threaten to be able to engage such aircraft. And you can do that like the North Vietnamese did when the Americans bombed them. Vietnamese were lying in their field shooting up their AKs, denying a certain airspace to American air power.
But that's not the Ukrainian objective with the jets. Their objective with the jets is to do strikes. It has nothing to do with their air defense. It has to do with being able to put strikes onto incoming troop movements while they're still in Russia, fuel, munitions, food, everything that an army marches on. They want to
Capability,
kill it
they
in Russia.
already have a capability. There
Yeah,
was,
but jets are shiny. I'm telling you, that's what they want the
oh,
jets for. They want to
oh,
blow shit up in Russia.
they want the jets because they're shiny. Yeah. So the Ukrainians already have strike teams in Russia. Again, it doesn't make sense that they don't. So there is a video where the Ukrainians, some deny it's a Ukrainian drone, some say it botched actually an operation for us. A drone landing on the radar of the Russian equivalent of an AVAX. So the security in the staging areas is abysmal. If you put five Ukrainians in a SEAL team in that airport, they blow up all these planes before the Russians know what's going on. And
what is the Russian, or excuse me, what does the Ukrainian Commando Special Forces community look like, though? Does it even exist? Or is it just guys who don't care if they're going to die and they've been fighting for a couple years, so they got the balls to go try it?
That is I think for the Ukrainians it's more the case of we discourage people that would be able and willing to do that, because if shit starts blowing up in Russia and the closer it gets to Moscow, is the less likely Western allies are willing to help them. So let's just imagine you had a special operations with, like you said, people that don't give a damn if they come back alive or not. It would again, the Ukrainians would absolutely be able to stage an operation like that and completely negate an airfield. Completely. Well, I wouldn't say they would be able to take the Kremlin, but the point I'm making, once an enemy is or an opposing force is determined to carry out a certain operation, then it is not a question of are we going to, but do we want to? What are we gaining from that? And the Ukrainian calculation is rightfully so. They would lose much more than what they gain. I mean, let's just say you are blowing up 100 Russian planes. Great, awesome. You do that 100, 200 kilometers behind the border. Then the question would immediately arise from Western allies. Well, what is that? Has that to do with your defense? Yeah, and
That's
I
not the way
agree with you. I agree with you that the best
It's not
defense is a defense that eliminates the enemy before they attack you.
Here's the
I'm
thing.
totally with you on that.
You use the planes to bomb the radars. You bomb the radars, they don't know what's going on in their airspace, whether it's occupied Ukraine or the Russian areas. You take out all the ground radar installations, then they have to put AWACS, they have to put aircraft to get radar back up to see where these missiles are coming from, since the Ukrainians are doing strike missiles now with the new HIMARS kits. Then you have to put your expensive stuff instead of that ground radar, which can just sit there and spin and tell you when the missiles are coming. Use the planes, take out all those radars. Then they have to put their planes, their radar systems in the air, and then you just shoulder fire them to death.
That
Drive
is
up
a
the price
scenario.
tag.
That
Stop
is a
killing
scenario you
Russians.
don't.
Start killing Russian equipment. There's plenty of Russians. Let's kill some stuff that costs some money.
I mean, looking at that, the Russians have been using shit old equipment. They are now pulling T-62s, not even T-65s. They're pulling T-62s out of storage.
Was that 60s era?
That is well, basically 40s, 50s technology.
Okay.
So I think the first I'm not sure if the T-62 is actually able to operate into an ABC environment. But I wanted to put.
They don't have any guided munitions left anyway.
Well, no, the Russians are using old beyond use state ammunition.
Mm-hmm.
The artillery is essentially worn out. And we are now talking about sending
But I mean, Russia has
820,
no need
900,000
for an
people.
integrated battlefield. Russia cannot maintain an integrated battlefield. They can't even do a primitive battlefield. So I mean, they don't need smart stuff. They just need better decisions.
Well, here's the problem.
You
Here's the
can
problem.
steamroll someone with the masses, poor, low tech. Look at Iran when Iran kicked Iraq out. They didn't even send them with guns. They gave everybody a little green bandana and they said, charge the Iraqis till they're out of ammo or they're close enough you can beat them to death. So it can be done. But they're not
Very,
even doing
very.
that good. They're
No,
not even.
they are not even
What's your
doing that good.
strategy?
And you see the reason for that, well, first of all, the reason for that strategy and the reason why every single piece of Russian equipment is that simple. Yeah. Low quality, that simple hardware is
Advance.
that you do not have the you do not have the people that can invent and maintain high-tech weapons. The Russian high tech is pretty low tech by our standards, but it did work in World War II. And Russian combined arms strategy is shoot shoot artillery at everything that you see, then walk over it with artillery again, and for good measure shoot everything that doesn't move 3 times. Then you send in the infantry.
Mhm.
When the infantry is in position, you roll the artillery up and you move on. That
Mhm.
has been that is Russian combined arms strategy. Yeah, in a grander scale, you are simply doing it with two different portions of an army.
Mhm.
So, and if you have the numbers which the Russians had in World War II, but I mean, in World War II, it worked up to the
No,
point
it's simple. You
where
you advance the artillery while the infantry's shooting. You advance the infantry while the artillery's shooting.
something like that. But in 1944, when the Russians stood at the German border or the former German border at the west of Poland, the Russians realized, well, we have more rifles than people. We need to start thinking about conserving people. And for the whole Cold War, their idea of conserving Russian or Soviet soldiers was as simple as send the Poles and the Czechs first. There was no
Well, and
idea about
Putin's
really
thing is let's
conserving.
send all the minorities from Russia. Let's go ahead and do a little ethnic cleansing from the eastern, northern, and southern regions of Russia.
And that is the whole thing. It is in numbers, in absolute numbers, it is not going to work for Putin because there is not enough young people. End of the story. So
Well, that's a problem. Basically, the Western world's doing okay. America's fine with as far as our population. We're going to be all right with our demographics. But the further east you go past Germany, the worse it gets, especially in Asia, where the population demographic is
the
there's
problem
not
is
enough
not
people.
the
There's not
problem is
enough of the
not
right
uh,
age people. Too many
n-
old
i-
people, not
that's
enough
not that's
middle.
not the
There's
problem
old, young,
in
middle.
particularly in Asia and Russia is that there is not enough people with the talent that you need to run a 21st or 22nd century economy. So the Americans and Western Europe, we can afford that demographic structure to a large degree. We are screwed in terms of retirement. So that is
But see,
that
we
is the
don't
thing. But it's a
execute
different issue.
people. If you screw up bad enough, we lock you up. And if we need you bad enough, we come get you.
So
See, in Russia and all these other, like, Mao and then, the CCP now, the current regime, if you screw up at it, like the Taliban, all these takeover regimes just massacre even these low level civil servants. And then they're like, okay,
the problem here is
what the hell do
ideology.
we do?
The problem is ideology. So well, I have lived in China, and the equation for anything like that is if you oppose the government, it is not only in terms of threatening the power structure, you are threatening culturally and ideologically. So we are talking about why is there no serious opposition to the current leadership in China? Because they have all been eliminated, period. And they are being eliminated by these authoritarian regimes for
Well,
several
and everyone who's
reasons.
not Han is being suppressed.
Well, that is the next thing. Um, but it is all the same ideology and the same kind of thinking in terms of, well, this person would be is threatening my rule because they are more intelligent. Yeah, what they are saying makes sense. So if in an open market of information people would follow that person, so I need to deny the open market for information. I need to make an example of that person, no matter how little the threat is. Yeah, no matter how little the threat is, you need to come down hard on any form of even remote resistance. Then the next person who has that idea will be thinking like, well, it's probably not worth it, especially when on paper or in de facto reality, you manage to improve living standards. And the success of the Chinese Communist Party post Tiananmen is based on that raising in living standards. The true story is that these living standards have been bought off atrocious labor conditions, number one, and secondly, foreign investment. Now, foreign investment is leaving China. China cannot afford for 1 second half of the situation that Russia is facing right now, people just standing up, leaving, whether they are Russian or foreign. Yeah. If that happens, China shuts the door. I mean, you can shout about it. You can vilify people who are saying this, but you are making yourself look like a complete idiot and worsening the situation if what you are saying is not happening you admit it is happening half a year later. So we are having now a situation. Apparently, Xi Jinping is angry with the Western world because they don't invest in China. And it doesn't occur to Chairman Xi that calling people mean foreigners that are paid by the CIA and are racist against us discourages people from giving him money. When a large investor just recently came out and said, well, I can't get any money out of China. I made millions in China. Awesome. I can't get it out. No one tells me why. So, and I mean, if you see that situation, any sane, logical person says, I'm not doing that. Yeah. And if you have the choice between living in a scenario where you will be scapegoated at some point, it has happened to a number of Western propagandists that did Xi's propaganda from China.
Didn't it
Happened over the
happen?
last year.
It happened to Xi himself.
So
He had to go to Let's Think About It day camp, didn't he? Because of his dad back when he was a kid.
I don't know the full story, but
I
essentially
think, yeah, she had to go
his
to
dad
a
was
Let's
purged.
Think About the
Yeah,
Government day camp.
and well, look at it from this point. I keep saying, why would we want to do anything against Xi Jinping? He's our best man. Yeah. So for
Why get rid of your best general?
exactly, and
Patton said about
it,
Hitler.
it is literally the case that particularly, I mean, the Yanks started it. Yeah. So I think the watershed moment is Pompeo's Nixon library speech when they made it official. This is the situation. Yeah. And it has been since then that the Western world, particularly the Americans, just kept pushing Xi's buttons. Yeah. And I think Rish is frozen on the other side. Are you still with us?